All right, I think we're all set. It's 4 o'clock, so let's go ahead and begin the committee meeting for the Finance and Facilities Committee, meeting on August 25th. We have Melissa Rooker on the phone as well, and this is on live stream also. And so the first thing I thought we would do, since it's been a little while, is why don't we start over on Gary's side and reintroduce ourselves and tell us one quick highlight of your summer. How's that?
There we go. Sorry. My name is Gary Stroud, and I am a teacher here in Shawnee Mission. Have been for 16 years. Proud to be a teacher here, and I am the librarian at Prairie Elementary School.
Highlight of summer.
Oh, for the summer, my wife and I went to California, and we spent quite a bit of time in Los Angeles and San Diego, and it was really, really nice.
Great. Okay. Why don't I do, Melissa, you're up next because your name placard's right over here, so I'm going to do it in order.
Brad, can you hear me?
Yeah, and Mary's going to come over and turn up the volume just a little bit.
Okay. Well, my name is Melissa Rooker. I'm the Shawnee Mission East area representative on this committee. I serve as the executive director of the Kansas Children's Cabinet and Trust Fund, and I would say the highlight of my summer is that I had my 6-month checkup and declared cancer-free. I had thyroid cancer that we were dealing with for the last couple years. So it's nice to get good news like that.
Great. Thank you. That is great news. Thank you. Brian.
Hello, everybody. I'm Brian Watson, former member of Shawnee Mission for 15 years, now private citizen. I am the director of the Cloud L. Cray Foundation, which focuses on economic education for K through 12 kids in Kansas City. And also I have my own business as well that I started in 2020 with Largay Travel. My highlight is a little bit like Melissa on the other end of it. In April, right after I got back, about the time I saw many of you at the Westwood View tour, my son Scott, who's 28, now 29, lives in Texas, was diagnosed with stage 4 colon cancer. So my wife and I have been flying back and forth to Austin a lot. She's down there right now as he's gone through treatments. It's a positive prognosis, but it's just a long haul all year long. So you don't expect that with a 28-year-old.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. Thanks.
Hello all. My name is Russell Knapp. I'm the Chief Financial Officer for Shawnee Mission School District. I'm in my 24th year here. A recent highlight was a trip to San Diego, California to play some golf, and it was absolutely wonderful. The weather was great. Good time.
Great. I'm Brad Stratton. I'm a school board member at large. And it's funny, I was trying to think how to answer my own question. And ironically, as empty nesters, we don't do our traveling during the summer. We don't start traveling until everyone goes back to school in the fall. So we're going to go to Europe for a couple weeks in September. So looking forward to that. Dr. Sinclair.
So I am Mary Sinclair, also one of the school board members as part of this committee, and serve as the president of the board at the moment. And I was already showing off with a couple people. I have had a pretty exciting summer. I had a son get married, and my daughter graduated from college. So it's been a big transition year for us in the Sinclair Huffman household. It's been fun.
Very good. My name is Joe Gilhouse, and I'm the Deputy Superintendent, and it's my 32nd year in Shawnee Mission School District. And I'd have to say the highlight was spending a week down in Fort Myers, Florida with the family. So just doing a variety of things down there, but it was nice to get away for a week.
Susan Lindahl. I'm not sure if this is on.
I'll help you out right there.
Yeah. Oh, thank you. Okay, Susan Lindahl, and I'm a retired CFO, and I serve at large on this committee. And highlight of the summer would also be spending time with family. We all convened in Colorado and played golf at the Broadmoor for a week, so that was a major highlight. So anyway, always good to be with family and always good to play golf.
Great.
I'm Ryan Weiniger. I represent Shawnee Mission Northwest. I was neighbors with Jamie Borgman, and she asked me to be on this committee a couple years ago. I have an optometry practice in Shawnee. My oldest graduated from Shawnee Mission Northwest this last year, and we moved him down to University of Arkansas last weekend. So, fun summer for us. And then my youngest son started as a freshman at Shawnee Mission Northwest last week. So, eventful summer at our house.
Everyone, I am Tyler Clubb, Director of Facilities, and in the facilities world, getting away for the summers doesn't happen that often. That is our busy time, and so also try a vacation sometime other between June and August. But we did get away for a week. Spent a week watching my daughter and her softball team do a tournament in Colorado, which was quite a relief in the middle of July. But yeah, good times.
Right. Thank you all for doing that. And also, just to let you know, Dr. Hubbard will pop in a little bit later, perhaps, if her schedule permits. This is the time of year and today where they're putting together the fall breakfast. So I have a feeling there's a practice going on right about now to get that ready. So she might be able to join us. With that, we'll move on to item number 2. And the first thing we'll be discussing is the budget. Monday night, the school board just wrapped up the multi-step process of the budget approval for the 22-23 school year. And so I thought this would be a good opportunity for Russ Knapp and the team to do an update on the budget, as well as the needs assessment process that we went through and finalized on Monday as well. First time for that. So I'll turn it over to Russ.
Thank you. James? Can we get this? Oh, there it goes. Never mind. A little delay. Yes, so Monday night, like Brad said, we finalized another budget for the 22-23 school year. You've seen this timeline in the past, so we're all the way down to the yellow bar where all we have to do now is submit the budget to the state. But this is a good refresher of all the things that we go through to build the budget, and these are more of the public in the public domain. These things, we start this in November, as I got a slide that I'll show you here in a minute, but these are all more of the formal statutory requirements. We started with the 2 workshops in May, and then we'll go through a numerous steps of taking it to the board for their publication in the newspaper, and then finally Monday night we approved the budget. You've seen this slide before. This is kind of the slides where the different pots of money that the school district has. We focus a lot on our operating funds because that's what drives the day-to-day, that pays the salary and benefits, the utilities, and the supplies and services. So this year's budgets, we're looking at nearly $260 million in operating budget, close to 60% of our total budget. At Monday night, there was some folks that made some comments during the revenue neutral hearing, and they talked about the bond that we just approved the Shawnee Mission School District to do $264.2 million in bond. That is true, back in January 21, but the voters approved that. Close to almost 70% of our voters approved that. So that gave us the ability to sell $264 million in bonds. We've sold half of those. The part that hits our budget is the bond and interest part of that. So when we have to pay that debt back, that's over a 20-year period, and we get excellent rates. So yes and no, the voters did approve for us to sell bonds, but the part that goes into the budget is just the interest and the bond and interest part, and we cannot use that for operating funds. It's strictly to build buildings, renovate projects, and and we have a list of those that we presented to the board many months before that the bond vote. So that was brought up, but yes, so it's just very isolated into that column for bond and debt, and it cannot be used for those other funds. This is the notice of hearing, so I'm just going to go over quickly. The actual total budget that was approved is $509 million, so that includes some transfers and some other funds. Our mill levy actually went down 2.335 mills. A mill is 1,000th based on your levy of your assessed valuation of your home. So we're down to 49.332. Assessed valuation did increase 10.9% across the Shawnee Mission School District. So that's one of the reasons why that mill levy goes down. When your assessed valuation goes up, it generates more tax dollars, which leads to the revenue neutral tax rate. So that was something that was passed 2 springs ago. This year, you probably got in your mailbox a revenue neutral tax rate in your mailbox from Johnson County. This was the first year that was required to be mailed out. And so, yes, our mill rate goes down, but what this tells you is what would the mill rate be based on your current year assessed valuation of your home or your business to generate the same tax dollars as the prior year. So, for example, the general fund, we generated $87 million last year based on 20 mills. It would take 18.696 mills to generate that same dollar amount based on your assessed valuation for the current year. However, state law says you have to levy 20 mills. So that's the bulk of our increase in our revenue neutral tax rate. Capital outlay, state law says you can do no higher than 8 mills. We levy 8 mills here. That generates about $40 million. And as we talked in prior meetings, we have close to 60 facilities, over $1 billion worth of property valuations. So it is monumental task that Tyler takes on every year with his team. It needs, when we can only cycle certain projects a year because the 40 million goes pretty fast when you're replacing parking lots and HVAC and doing the upkeep. If you looked at all those other funds, you can see we actually went down in our tax, the amount of tax that we're going to levy, just a little bit. So that is a positive thing. We'll take it when we can get it because each year is different. So we'll see what next year brings. But so that was a positive note. So the reason why we exceeded that, the revenue neutral tax rate is mainly around that general fund levy and the capital outlay. I wanted to show you this slide. You've seen it in the past. I first wanted to, it says projected 21, 22. It's actual now, but we ended up surplusing close to $2.5 million. So this is just our operating funds. So we surplus $2.5 million in our operating funds. And so when we talk about surplus, all we're saying is we took in $2.5 million more in revenues than we spent in expenditures. And so that increased our ending fund balance to $23 million, leaving us 11.55%. And if you recall, the board passed policy a couple years ago that we wanted to target a 10 to 15% in our ending fund balance. So we met board policy and that target 11.5%. So fast forward to the budget that we approved for 22-23 Monday night. We approved a budget that we're going to deficit spend $2.7 million, leaving our ending fund balance at $20.3 million and 10%, right at the 10%. And so part of the reason why we're deficit spending, the board gave us the authority to the IBB negotiating team to actually deficit spend down to the 10% to make that money available to the compensation package for all our different pay groups. Okay, so that was that increased the bucket there for those packages. And Tyler's going to get up and talk a little bit more about bond projects, but I wanted to give you a little bit of a financial viewpoint of the bond. So we sold half of them at $132 million. We did get a premium of $14.4 million. One of the reasons we got the 10% premium, and one of the reasons we can get that premium is because our bond rating is AAA. And as long as we can keep it up there, we'll get the lowest interest rates and these bond premiums, and that helps the taxpayers when you're repaying your bond and interest payments. And so right now, and then a little bit of interest is still very low out there on the market. So it does generate a little bit of interest. So right now, we're at $146.6 million that we can spend in issue one. All the projects have either been spent or encumbered, meaning that we went to the board for approval. So if you look at the fund balance, it's zero, but we still have plenty of cash left that we're spending on those projects. We'll come back, probably start the process. I'm looking at November or December to start the process of issuing the bonds number 2, the second half. Takes about 90 days from beginning to end to sell those bonds. Okay. So like we said, we approved the budget on Monday night. Now we're kind of in our audit season. We are getting audited left and right. So August, September, and October, we've already been audited by KSDE, our special education program. We turn in our official head count on, shortly after September 20th with all our weightings. Then the KSD comes back and audits all those numbers in October. Our independent auditors are this week and next week are doing the field work for our independent audit, and Capers is decided to audit us at the same time. So
It's just random.
It's just random. So yeah, so we're very busy, and then November we start this process again. We'll talk a little bit about the building needs assessment here, but as you can tell, we'll get going with the building needs assessment, and then right away we go into collecting budget requests and putting together some funding scenarios to build a budget on for 23-24. The profile and needs assessment.
Russ,
Yes.
I'll pause just there for a second to see if folks have any questions about, because you went through a lot on the budget, and so before we go to the needs assessment, I thought we'd pause there to see if there's any questions, and I'll sprinkle one in, and that is, we begin this process in the fall, and then we wind up approving it here the next fall. So we start in October and we approve it in August. Can you talk about where inflation and interest rate changes have affected where it looks like at the beginning to the end, meaning because we've seen a dramatic shift in the prices of so many services and products that we consume as a district?
Yeah, so yeah, that's a very good point. Like for the best example I can tell you is our diesel fuel that we buy for our student transportation. From the time that we presented to you in May, we added $400,000 to that budget line by the time what we brought to you in August. Our natural gas is another one that is hitting you hard. We've been very spoiled for a good 10 years. We were buying it at about $2.80 per unit. We'll just call it per unit. We're buying it now for $9 per unit. So that we were buying it. Our total district-wide was in the $500,000 to $600,000, and now we'll take it up to about $900,000 probably. We anticipate for 22-23. So we're seeing that. We're seeing things that we can't purchase because it's just not available to us. Supplies and services that we buy on a daily basis are more expensive. Tyler and Joe probably will hit on it when they do the bond projects, but we're really, really seeing it there where the cost of raw materials are really driving up the price of our projects, and they'll probably touch on that. Yep.
Thanks. Other questions that folks have as they work through a big set of numbers in order to put together the budget? One more I'll more point out, and you don't need to go to the slide, but essentially what was interesting to me as we went through this process is our ending balance was that $20 million 2 years ago, $23 million-ish last year.
Yes.
So that's what allowed us to do the deficit spending budget for this year to take it back to essentially $20 million.
Right.
So over a 2-year period, we'll be back to about a $20 million or that 10% surplus carry forward.
Yeah, and the important thing to remember when you deficit spend, you only can do that one time, because when you deficit spend, you're spending your cash balances. So if it's your personal checkbook, you're going over to your money market or savings account to do that. For us, it just comes out of that fund balance, so you can do it one time. But like we said, we had that board policy in there that 10 to 15% for that fund balance is very helpful in budgeting purposes. And it will help when we sell this bond in December, they look at our fund balances when they determine our bond rating, so it will help at that time as well.
Brad, this is Melissa. I have a question if no one in the room does.
Sure, go ahead, Melissa.
Russ, I know this was mentioned Monday night in the budget hearing, and I think you mentioned it today, but if we were to look at the revenue neutral slide and look at the series of separate line items that have mill levy attached, I think it's worth emphasizing the 20 mills is set by state law. It can neither be raised nor lowered by the local school district. In other words, the state board, or not even the state board, the Shawnee Mission Board of Education cannot change that 20 mill levy. Can we talk about the LOB, the supplemental general? That, to get to the rate we levy in Shawnee Mission, that took a vote locally. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And then you've gone through the bond issues that the voters in the district attendance area had a public vote on, correct?
That's correct.
So there's very little on this list that is actually at board discretion, correct?
That is correct.
Okay, I just wanted to emphasize that because I think when people see this list of separate levies, it can be, can give an impression that the board is levying all sorts of things, but there's very little of this in control of the district itself.
And I would add that when we go through and complete our budget documents from KSDE, it backs into the mill levy that we have to levy to run our program. So we really don't have any discretion to increase these levies beyond to generate the resources necessary to pay for those expenditures. So a good example is the LOB that you talked about. We got community approval to be at 33%, which is the most you can be at by state statute. And when you work through your budget documents, it backs into that mill levy. So we went from 13.7 to 11.9. So we need 11.9 mills to fund the LOB at 33%, period. You don't get to adjust that as a school district. And this is true for all school districts in the state of Kansas. So yeah, that's a very good point, Melissa.
Thank you.
I think, yeah, that's on, okay. There were two thoughts I had. One was that, and while we're talking about the revenue neutral policies, the state legislature and the governor changed the level at which the 20 mills hits each homeowner, correct? So instead of having the first, yeah.
It was 20 and they took it to 40 on the general fund. So the first 40,000 of your home value is exempt from the 20 mills.
Okay. So some of our homeowners saw a bit of a relief in that they had a portion of the value of their home was exempt from the 20 mills. Do you know if that impacted us a lot and how much we were able to generate? Am I thinking about the math correctly?
No, we still do the 20 mills.
Okay.
The county collects that and sends it directly to the state. It doesn't flow through us anymore. So what would happen at the state level, they should see less.
They would see less revenue coming.
They possibly could see less revenue, but if assessed valuation goes up, they can make that back because your house value went up.
Okay.
So.
The other part, a question I was going to throw back to the committee is one of the first meetings we had, we were talking about what information do we want to make available from a district perspective to parents and patrons, and just even very basic questions about how funds are used, how you have two main pots of funds, one for buildings and facilities, the capital outlay and bond versus what can be used for the day-to-day operations. And so we heard a couple of questions Monday night about that from folks kind of with some questions about why we need money for operations when we just raised money for bonds. My question really back to the board is, I feel like when I look for that answer, like on the district website, we've addressed that question. We can direct people to frequently asked questions. So if we have a patron who directs a question to the district or the board, we can direct them to the budget and finance, the frequently asked questions, and then it's also really embedded in a lot of the budget workshop documents. Is that a sufficient way, at least, of responding to folks? I don't think we'll ever stop the question, but is that sufficient information on the district's part when we talk about it in meetings, or having the information on the website to be able to clarify that to folks? Are there other points in which you could see embedding that information? That's a real common misconception, I think.
Well,
Does my question make sense?
Yeah, and I'll throw out one thought along those lines is so, we're all in information overload every day, but perhaps there's a way that the district can be more proactive as the tax statements go out or as the new assessed valuations go out. So if there's something in their mail and that they happen to see something in a newsletter or online or social media saying, and if you want more information, go to this website. That's just one little idea. So I'll throw that out to see what people think as taxpayers. When you get the statement, you look at if you look at your statement, and you go through all the different line items. I think school district has 6 or something on there, and so a lot of people are very confused and overwhelmed by that. So there's one response is that we could proactively address it before the question comes in.
Yeah, one idea I might have is we could somehow make the building leaders have this information a little bit more readily available to them, because then they're armed, if you will, with the information that they can. A lot of times these questions just have a real quick answer, or directing them like you did last night. It's on the website, but if the building leaders could have some of that information, as a former building leader, it seems like it would be something nice to have for PTA meetings or site council meetings or any of those kinds of gatherings. Somehow put it in their hands a little bit clearer.
Other thoughts before we move on? Thank you. All right, Russ, want to talk about needs assessment?
Yeah. This isn't anything new. School districts have been doing this for years. It's all part of the budget development process that we work with the buildings, the building administration. However, the state statutes were approved this spring that required us to do these profile and needs assessments and put it out on our website. So this is a screenshot of what our website looks like. Now I can just take this there. So this is out on our website. We loaded it up with multiple or lots of information that we use. So what I was saying is that they just approved this legislative session, so we really didn't get what the template would look like from KSDE until July. So kudos to all our building administrators, to Dan Grumman and our team upstairs that put all this together. We had to turn around pretty quick. A lot of these things that you see on the left is just information that we've always done year after year, and we just put it out there. We linked it. It's already on our website, and we just linked it to different spots on our website. So a lot of that information we gather all year long. It goes into the budget. A lot of it, is centers around staffing. So it's all our teaching staffing and our classified staffing. And that makes up, close to 85% of our budget. So there's that. And then part of the statute says you had to answer 3 questions. For every building in your district, you had to do a needs assessment. So if you were to click on elementary, middle, high, and you can navigate to each building. This is Shawnee Mission East. Notable school characteristics. So the building administration laid out some bullet points of what's unique about the school. A link to the report card on the KSDE website. And then you had to do a needs analysis. So the state statute said you had to answer these 3 questions. What barriers must overcome for each student to achieve grade level proficiency on assessments? What budget action should be taken to address and remove those barriers? And how much time will it take each student to achieve grade level proficiency on the state assessments? And there's multiple bullet points here responding to those questions. And then eventually, each of those building staff or needs assessment went to the Board of Education, and they reviewed it and made their own comments. And these were all required by state statute. And then they required the board minutes to reflect that. So that's just an example. That's Shawnee Mission East. We turned it around pretty quick. So this school year, now that we have time, this process will roll out. We'll start that in November. Buildings will have a little more time to reflect on those questions. They'll have a little more time to engage their staff and the BLTs, the building leadership teams at their buildings, to consider what their needs are. Hello?
And Russ, so
And I'll pause there if you got any questions on those.
So 44 of these, or how many of, I'm doing the math.
We actually had to do 47 because we threw in Horizons and Arrowhead.
Okay, so 47 of these were done. I'm going to turn to Dr. Sinclair and both say thank you for your help with this, but also do you want to talk about how the board could provide input on 47 buildings and 47 reports?
Do we want to say? Sorry, I missed the question. No, we're just talking about the needs assessment. Yeah. The needs assessment process. So the leadership team made some Herculean efforts to respond to this legislative new state law, and really began pulling together the information and setting up a structure for each of the buildings to create and consolidate their information and to reflect on it in this process. And then I was able to go through as board president as well as each board member and go through each of the school buildings, needs, basically each of their responses. And there was some, I don't know if you want to talk more about.
Can I have you make the microphone? Yeah. That's all right.
So we tried to help the board just a little bit because we did have so many buildings, and I'm going to talk specifically about elementary, but the same held true for every level. But we tried to sort of chunk them. So if we had really high growth for multiple years, or title schools, or even though we have 34 schools and 5 different feeder patterns, we have maybe one from each feeder pattern that look alike, are similar in different ways, whether that be on student demographics, maybe on size. So we have some really large elementaries, some really small elementaries, performance, and it might have been performance in math, or it might have been performance in reading, or it might have been performance in both. So we sort of chunked those and said, okay, here's a list, I don't know, probably 15 categories that we gave the board, and said, here's just a place to start, in addition to they had this work from the schools. And the state of Kansas had released an actual needs assessment that it was just, it was a legal-sized sheet. It's massive. And it's things that really our buildings do year-round. It's not something you would sit down and do, oh, let's do a needs assessment today. It's things that we're monitoring it annually, from all the way to when our state assessments come to to the results of that to a map assessment in the fall, in the winter, and in the spring. So we're looking at that year round. At a staffing, we say we have a weighted formula that we use for staffing buildings with interventionists. So that's something that we start as early as November and bring around and really finalize in January and February before we start staffing for the next year. So we took all of that information and buildings. We said less is more. People aren't going to read 10 pages of needs assessment. So we really tried to keep it as minimal as possible and, have those notable characteristics and then answer those three questions required by law. And then the fourth portion of that was the board comments. And Mary did a lot of the legwork as the board president, and then we provided them to the board, 2 or 3 weeks in advance of the budget hearing. So that was the process. It worked well. It was a lot with the state statute coming so late in the year, so it'll be a lot easier next year. And plus, we have the structure in place. But
So that pre-organizational work that was done by the team was incredibly helpful. And it was also very meaningful to look at all the multiple metrics that buildings use to identify those needs and district leadership team uses to bring resources to bear. So being able to look at how students, as you mentioned, are performing in terms of English language arts or mathematics and the Kansas assessments, which gives us more of a benchmark of their performance in relation to the state standards, but you also had the adaptive metrics and the MAP scores and looking to see where students are growing. So not only where are students when they come into the building, but are they each and all making growth over the period of the school year. And as well as kind of, some of the buildings also identified and connected it to their work in terms of the strategic plan by the district, as well as how that fed into all the accreditation goals through KISA. So there was all sorts of moving parts, multiple measures that fed into this needs assessment and how to allocate those resources per building and where needs were still identified.
yeah, one thing I would just like to add to that, there's the question about when will all students, can you scroll up for me who's in control here to, I think it's question number 3. When will all students be at a level 2 on the state assessment or level 3 on the state assessment? But whatever regardless of the question, I think it's really important, and we felt like it was really important. We worked with building principals on this, and we've worked with the board on this, and we've advocated in Topeka for this, but it shouldn't be about one test on one day. I mean, we all have bad days. There's probably all been times when we've taken a test or a driver's license exam or whatever the case may be where that day wasn't the right day for us to take it. And so having multiple measures about kids, about not just reading and math, but reading, math, social studies, science, social, emotional. I mean, if we're not in a great place, we're probably not learning today. So that plays a role here too. So it was important to us, and you will see this on multiple building responses that we're not sure we'll ever be at 100% on one day, right? And so it's important to look at multiple assessments to make sure that kids are performing and growing.
Thank you.
Dr. Hubbard, this is Melissa Rooker. I appreciate you making that point. I think what I would draw back to is 2 things. I mean, that was the mindset of No Child Left Behind, that we would reach a point where there was 100% of students who achieved the particular target level. And I think nationally we saw that even Congress realized that goal became irrational and repealed No Child Left Behind and replaced it with ESSA. So I think we're behind the curve in Kansas when the focus is on those state assessment scores rather than the whole package of assessments and metrics by which students demonstrate growth over time. So that's number one. Number 2 is a question. As we scrolled quickly through the Shawnee Mission East response to this, the needs assessment details, it appears that there were details such as, it would take a reduction of of student-teacher ratios to this level, the addition of particular staffers. When you look across the needs assessments that each building have on file, is it possible to put a dollar amount on what those actions would cost over and above what the district is receiving through the state finance formula? And I ask this because if I think back to my tenure as a lawmaker, we commissioned a cost analysis, the Lori Taylor study, that told the legislature how much it would take to achieve the outcomes that the state has adopted. And the legislature, even today, when we are at our constitutional funding agreement with the Supreme Court settlement in the Gannon lawsuit, we are nowhere near the amount that the legislature's own cost study told us we would need to fund. So I'm curious if, as a district, you can quantify the difference between what you're getting and what those needs assessments say you need to get students to a level of proficiency that the state is asking for.
So a couple things. I would start by saying I want to first acknowledge that I think our teachers are doing an amazing job with what they have, and it's difficult right now with staffing being short, and still I'm constantly in awe when I go in classrooms and see the things that are happening in our classrooms. But with that being said, I can't give you a number. I wouldn't even really start to want to guess on that. But what I could say is the best place to start would be to start with our lowest performing students and fully fund special education. That would be an immediate $8 million jump for the Shawnee Mission School District. And they really, special needs kids, they really take a lot of resources and staff, not just staff, but resources in addition to that, whether it's transportation, and classified staff to support. But there are kids that would help us get to that 100% mark really quickly, and fully funding special education would be the number one place that I would start. And then I would also say those at-risk learners and ELL learners that bring different challenges to the table would also be another place. But if nothing else, fully funding special education would go so far for us.
And I thank you for that. And I would add, I'm currently at an early childhood summit in Phoenix, and we are immersed in presentations around brain science and what we know happens in those first 2 to 3 years of life, but and then translates into all of the birth to 5 years ahead of entry into kindergarten. So I would say that getting to a point where every family has access to high quality services for their children early on, whether it's parents as teachers, whether it's a preschool classroom, whether it's good quality childcare. I think all of those things, plus the supports that parents need to be able to stay focused on the well-being of their children, also play a significant role in mitigating the issues that you as a school district deal with once kids do and enroll and enter your classrooms. So thank you for your response.
Okay, thank you. All right, anything else on needs assessment?
I do not have anything else.
Okay. Do you want to move towards the COVID-19 and Esser 3?
Yes.
And I'll just, while he's doing that, encourage the folks around the room that a lot of this new formatting is new. So as we think about ways to getting this in the hands of the public, or at least letting the public know that all this work's been done and that it's there, and you get a really quick snapshot answer, it's really good stuff for those that are interested and curious to learn about their own school building.
And okay, so on the last few slides are going to be Esser update. I think I've showed you this before. We've really had about 4 major sources of Esser dollars. Esser 1 was year 1 of the pandemic. That money has all been spent. Johnson County Sparks was a reimbursement of $1.2 million. That has been completed. And this 21-22 school year, we use Esser $2, and we have about $473,000 left of that money. And I'll show you what we spent that on, or refresh your memories on that. We have till September of 23 to obligate those funds. And just past this August, the State Board of Education approved our application for Esser $3. So we'll be able to start drawing down Esser 3 when we need it for this fiscal year. That total award was $23.7 million. And if you recall, we chose to do half of it in 22-23 and the second half in 23 to 24 to fund our Esser plan that we took to the board for their input and approval, and a lot of stakeholders in our school district. So this was Esser 2. Again, we have about $473,000. We use it on social workers and counselors and reduce some elementary class sizes. That we budgeted 18. That actually ended up taking 22. We did some long-term. We added like 54 building subs. They would show up at each building every day, and they were needed. We're still finding shortages in our subs. We had elementary, middle, and high had some care teams budget. We striked out the indoor air quality. That was the HVAC to fund the $600 retention payment that we paid last September of 21, and some substitute nurses. So that was Esser 2 in year 1. Esser 3 is just a continuation of that plan. So we'll do the same plan for 22-23 and the 23-24 school year. The board did approve Monday night a retention payment of $700 for all eligible employees, that will be paid out on September 20th of next month. So this plan is just a continuation. And again, it goes through 23-24, and we always are very cautious that a lot of these are personnel positions that are being funded by Esser. And when that Esser money dries up in 23-24, we're going to have to make a very difficult decision whether we keep these positions or absorb them into the operating budget for 24-25. Yes, sir, Ryan.
I think the retention payment's fantastic. It looks like you did 600 last year and then 700 this year. Was there any review of that, like surveys or anything that went out to see the benefit and how much penetration that actually affected? Because if it's a $2 million or $2.2 million benefit last year, and the receivers didn't see it as a value, did it get analyzed that it was worth doing again this year?
We didn't actually do a survey per se. It probably had some benefits, but we also have so much turnover. You might have gotten some retention out of it, but you also probably left. You might have got 10 that stayed and probably 10 left. I don't know, Dr. Hubbard, if you want to add anything.
We haven't surveyed. It's probably a really good idea, but I would tell you the feel feels really good, and there's a lot of appreciation for that. I also think that it absolutely helped at the negotiation table when we were negotiating with the teachers union, both appreciative on their side and us being able to give just a little bit more than we would have traditionally.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's awesome it was done, but when I sat on an insurance board, a national insurance board, they did that to their providers, and it actually had a negative effect because the providers were like, this is all you're sending us, and on average they send about $1,000 to each provider in their network. So
I do think we got some of that.
Information that came back, it's like, whoa, we thought we were doing this awesome thing, and there are other benefits, and they had the same idea when they did that. But that's why I was curious if anything was done.
It's a good idea. We could ask the question before we go to year 3.
Yeah.
I also just wanted to point out that Russ mentioned that we struck indoor air quality in both 2 and 3. I just want to point out that we're not doing that. We just did it out of different funds, and we're doing a lot of indoor air quality, both out of capital outlay and out of bond funds. So I just don't want people to think we said, not doing that.
I was thinking about that. the premium pay to building staff. And we did survey in part because that was part of the Esser 3 planning process, right? So every district had to survey to see how the community wanted us to, their input on the use of the federal relief funds to support learning recovery and safe learning environments. And one of the pieces of feedback was to do another retention pay or, stipend to teachers for that, all staff.
I think that was number one on 4 out of the 5 groups that we surveyed.
So that included teachers as well as patrons, correct?
So we divided it into students. Somebody here correct me if you remember differently. Students,
Parents?
parents, community members, and then staff.
Staff. And all groups supported the use of those dollars for.
I believe all groups had it in the top 3, but I think most of the groups, it was their number 1.
So it was, I think, that a decision, I don't know, I personally think a decision to stay boils down to more than a $500 or $600 stipend, but I think it's right? It is, it's an acknowledgement, but it would be good to, on the other hand, ask about that. It's a good question.
All right, here I go. As a teacher, someone in the trenches, I can tell you that I really appreciated the retention payment, and a lot of the teachers I've talked to have appreciated it because, it feels good that the districts noticed that we've gone through this COVID. COVID was really hard to teach in. We worked extra hard as teachers to try to reach our students first online through the computer, which was a totally new teaching experience for all of us. And then, teaching during the masking period and everything that came with that. I think it's really great, and the teachers really appreciate the district's acknowledgement that we did go through that. So I think that's a really great, if that answers your question, and as well as the support that, the Esser 3 funds have provided us in our classroom. The instructional coaches have been wonderful in our buildings. They've helped the teachers get back on track. Of course, obviously, the social workers have been awesome as well. So, everything that's gone on has been great. I'm just hoping that we can figure out a way to maintain it because it's been really helpful at the building level.
Challenge accepted. Anything else about this update on the Esser dollars?
Okay.
All right. Thank you, Russ.
Yes, thank you.
Appreciate those updates. And now we'll shift over to a bond update. As was referenced earlier, with the different funding sources that we have at our disposal for taking care of new projects and continuation of maintenance projects. And as Tyler mentioned earlier, very busy summer. So.
And during this little, as you're getting set up, I just want to, the one stat that always hits me is that I think, Russ, you said in the past that there are 42 revenue sources you work with to everything to, like some huge number of revenue source, like, did I over-exaggerate that?
About 38 separate funds.
38 separate funds that all come in and go out at different times and all have to balance down to
Yes.
the penny.
Yep.
I just think that's an impressive feat. So, thank you.
Okay. So on to the facility side. What I want to start us off with is our Gantt chart and just show the timeline. So that red vertical line is where we're at currently within this 5-year bond. Not only does it show what's in the future, but we can look back and see the timeline of what we've done in the past. Shows the projects by feeder patterns, by schools, and it is, you can easily see what's coming up and almost to expect how long it would take for a high school or a middle school or a rebuild to take place.
Tyler?
Yep.
Putting that red line in there really puts this in perspective on how much work has happened in year 1 of this bond. That is, kudos to that, for your team, for sure.
Thank you. It, in one of them, let's just talk about the elementaries real quick. So we can see, I mean, we're getting close, and it's, you know, the yellows, you got June and July, they're separating for our summertime, and to where we're going to open, or most of the majority of the work tries to take place if we can, depending on the project. But you can see Westwood View, and so no more blue. I've got that white line again, and that's one project that's not 100% completed, but it's done. It's off of our main radar. And then, you know, Deemer, there's only 3 or 4 more of those little blue lines to till that one's finishing up. But, you know, every 6 months, the way it looks, those first 3 elementary schools are going to open up, and it's just one after another, along with the 10 remodels. And then that doesn't include the furniture, that doesn't include the asphalt and the HVAC. This is just basically out of this bond, the big picture items that are detailed out on this Gantt chart. And so what I'm going to do is this presentation's built almost like projects that are under construction that we're working on, and then I got the second half that we're gonna go through and look at the completed projects that just wrapped up on, I'm gonna call it this year's portion of the bond. But so Westwood View, so why isn't this on the completed side? I wanted to, it was there, but just there's still little tiny things that I want to make sure is taken care of before we move it to the bottom of the sheet and say it's a completed project. But there's still the landscaping, you know. So yes, Westwood View opened up. Kids are in, but I can't, you know, the sod, the plants, the trees, those things can't take place in August. And so it is pushed back just a little bit. You know, we're going to do that in September and make sure it's got the right season to do what it needs to.
Can I interrupt and give credit where credit's due, and that is, this was not to have been open by this fall, so it's actually ahead of schedule. So I want to make sure that that's reflected too. Yep.
And you're going to hear me, I'm going to talk about it on each one, and because of that, and this was a great team. I mean, Hollis and Miller, so each one of these projects, I'm going to tell everybody who our architect and our construction manager was, and it might get repetitive, but without them, this team doesn't exist. And this was a great team. So Hollis and Miller, architects, Newkirk, Novak were our construction managers on it. Westwood View is a 72,000 square foot elementary school. And yes, it did open in August, but the majority of our landscaping scope, it will second, third week of September, and they're still ongoing. And this might be 2 to 3 months, but we're going to have those punch list items that we couldn't do because it opened up 6 months ahead of schedule. John Deemer, and so this part of our team, it's Insight Design Studios and J.E. Dunn. This building's going to be a little bit larger. It's approximately 78,000 square feet. And I wish I could go back, but so you can see my red line on Deemer. And so, you know, that's our progression and how much farther we, you know, it basically started 6 months after. And so, but there's our rendering. You know, I wanted to add a rendering picture and then where we're at currently up to date on these. And so, it's extremely close. There it is. We got all the brick. The windows are in. You know, we can walk this building. You can clearly tell from north to south where they're started. You know, but I've got paint, I've got tile, caulking, flooring. But as far as you go south, we're still hanging sheetrock on a section of the building. So it's
amazing how much the real life construction looks like the rendering. You know.
Right. And then, so on each one of these rebuilds, our construction partners, they give us weekly updates. And so you can, and there is a section on our district website that there is a bond page, and all of these are updated. So once we get them in, give me a week or two, these will be uploaded onto the system, and everybody can walk through it with us and see the progress. But I mean, just a couple items. I mean, you can see the gym. I mean, it's the ceiling's painted, it's in, the Tectum panels are on, the walls are painted. It's minus the floor. I mean, that's how close it is. But you can go to other areas and still see fresh sheetrock with one coat of mud on it. So it's a process, but it's going. And I'll go back. I want to make sure I touch base on it. But so September 6th, put it on our calendars. But it's Board of Education, our cabinet, and this committee here. We have a tour. We'll be able to walk through John Deemer, 4 p.m. September 6th. So Pawnee Elementary, This is a Hollis & Miller architect. Newkirk Novak's our construction manager. This is also going to be one of the larger elementaries. It's 77,000 square feet. Each building's a different animal. Both of the first two, Westwood View was on a completely different lot. We were able to start. Deemer has to be a tear down, and Pawnee we're building on site, and each one of them has challenges. With that, with it being on site, the kids get to see it, the principals, the teachers, they get to see this going on, but your footprint's smaller and everything's compact, and it makes it difficult, but we're rolling through it. But one thing I want to note, so I took this picture on Monday with the precast and how fast it's going through these, and then on my next slide you're going to understand that they sent this to me Thursday, and so you can see how much more precast was just put up over the course of this week on the progress. So,
I do want to add on Pawnee that Tyler and I went out and met with the staff at their faculty meeting on Tuesday evening. We also sent a letter out to the community. We believed that we could complete the Pawnee facility and keep the students in school the whole time. Due to some supply chain and the procurement of materials, we've run across some challenges to now we have to move Pawnee Elementary to Indian Creek during fourth quarter. We shared that with the staff and community. We need more than 10 weeks to demolish that building, reconnect the sewer system, abate the building, and build the parking lot where the current school is. So we had high hopes that we could. We run into some challenges with our timeline. This is why we have to move them out for 9 weeks. We know it's very frustrating. The staff had a wonderful attitude on Tuesday. I've talked to several community members today after hearing the explanation. They understand, and it was rather pleasant conversations. So I did want to put that little piece in it because it's an unforeseen twist that we had to adjust.
Thank you, problem solving.
Yes. So, those first three slides. So those are our current elementary rebuilds. And so there should be 4 or 5 of these remodel updates that I can handle in the next couple slides. And I didn't do any snapshots of current construction. Once it gets closer, right now you're going to see metal studs and unfinished roofs, right? And so, but this is the rendering. This is what as we noted with the Deemer project, but this is what the finished product of what we're going to have. So in just 30,000 foot view, Shawnee Mission East, it's our Insight Design Studios, Newkirk Novak's our construction partners. It's an addition, and the majority of that project is going to be a large group instructional space, multi-use. Think about it in a high school that doesn't have one and what they can do with that.
And 2 classrooms right next to
2
it.
classrooms, elevator. Yep. Yep.
This building was not because when it was built, ADA compliant in this particular part of the building, and this fixes that.
Does. Horizons, and so that is DLR Architects and Nabholz Construction. A lot of the portion at Horizons, the work is going to be numerous collaboration spaces throughout that building. A lot of renovations inside of it. There's been, certain programs here and there, and they come, they go, they leave, and those spaces are being fixed back in what can incorporate great with Horizons program right now. One of the biggest ones is going to be this area inside the cafeteria. So Westridge, DLR Architects again, J.E. Dunn's construction. So there will be, I'm gonna call it a major student collaboration space added upstairs or on that main first floor, and there's also some renovation downstairs in the basement of some unused space or unusable space that now will be. Part of the details of Westridge upstairs is that courtyard. So incorporated with the existing, at one time, it used to be the front entry at Westridge, and so that will now be incorporated into this remodel, and then that outdoor classroom and a bunch of storefront glass to tie it all together. And then our early childhood center, Kevin Cowan is our architect. Nab Holtz is our construction manager. And so just a lot of work trying to incorporate an early education system into a previously junior high school. And so imagine those classrooms, what we've got to do. And so, and because of this and the age of the building and the scope of work it takes to do it, this has turned into a two-phase project. So this last summer, we can see that that portion's been completed, but we did the ceiling, the lighting, the abatement. Now we can move on, well, Cat 6 upgrade and some AV additions. Now, the second phase, we'll move through all the cabinetry in the classrooms, restroom renovations. We got to get them down get those toilets usable for 3 and 4-year-olds versus 12 and 13. And then flooring, lots of flooring needs in that also.
Can you remind folks which building that was prior?
That is the old Broadmoor building.
Yeah.
Yep. And so we got a fun one here, so we'll want to move through. This is going to capture some of the projects that we are calling completed that either could have been 6 months ago or just 6 hours ago. But these are, this is where we're at. So this first one, Shawnee Mission North, and so that was DLR and Abholz. And it was the addition of that training facility off of the northeast corner, off that Johnson Drive corner of Shawnee Mission North. So it was around 7,600 square feet.
What do the students think?
I think they love it.
They do. They love it.
Yeah.
Well, those 15, the other 4 high schools.
Right. But the good thing is North's basement, their workout facility is no longer in a basement with no windows.
Not only that, but I think it's important to note that their workout facility set in the middle of the English,
Right below them, but in the middle, that's correct.
right in the middle. And so they were above them, and so think about weights banging and music playing loud or happening in the weight rooms. It was a huge disruption to the academic and learning environment too. Plus, people don't often think about this, but we have an exceptionally large ROTC program at Shawnee Mission High.
Yep.
And they use this facility as well in their training.
Shawnee Mission Northwest. So this was a DLR in the Abholz project. And
Students go crazy too here.
I don't know, I couldn't stop when and I was putting this bullet in. I was like, what didn't we touch there in the middle? And so, I mean, it is the mall, the cafeteria, the main office, the addition of all that storefront. With that, we added a bunch of art displays, the student center, and then the restroom renovations there. And it's just.
Those are actual pictures.
These are actual pictures, yes.
They look better than the renderings.
Yep, they do. They look better than the renderings. And
Yep. Yeah, they did a fantastic job.
yep, all new flooring. Yeah. Nora.
And some carpet too.
Indian Woods. So there, as you see in the bottom right picture, that's the 3-story addition. In that, each floor, it's basically a collaboration space in the middle with two classrooms on either end on each floor. So 6 classrooms, 3 collaboration spaces, or 9 rooms, however you want to, which way you want to talk about it. But finished picture on the inside, there's the large collaboration space on each floor in that top left picture. And then outside that addition, and this would be on 2nd floor, but try to show too, I mean, there was tying that addition into the old one with that old ceiling, and it shows the new drop ceiling, all the LED lighting, and some of the architectural designs of that addition. Then our playgrounds, so these were the 4 elementaries that we did. This isn't exactly all of it. Some of these buildings have 2 playgrounds, but I wanted at least to capture a picture at each one. So Highlands, Rose Hill, Rising Star, Corinth, all brand new. The fall zone's great, the all-inclusive playground, the colors. Really pleased for the last 3-4 years of doing these playground upgrades and how they're turned out and how long they're lasting. And then it's never ending, it seems, right? We're back to that Gantt chart in the schedule, but to pull this off, I've heard it, but procurement's already talked about today, scheduling timelines, but it needs to start now. So we might be wrapping up this last summer's work, but now these are the next highlights on our list, and the conversations with these teams and their projects and the principals. This is all going to start very soon, and once the designs are out, then we're going to be going out for bid, and you'll be seeing those at the board meetings to get passed for these bond projects.
Great, thank you. Questions, comments, observations? We've talked a lot about the inflation of products. How about labor? As our contractors are filling a lot of positions to try to build these facilities and remodel, what are we seeing in the labor market within construction?
Everything. So
I would say yes.
yes, that'd be the best answer. So
Inflation, yes.
we're really
Labor, supplies, all of it.
we're working very hard to be extremely fiscally responsible with the amount of money that our community's been so kind to give us, but we are facing huge challenges with the cost of materials and the cost of labors. Some of our bids are coming in for a $5 million project, are coming in $2 and $3 million over. For a school project, $7 million over. And we go over every single line item, everything, get 3, 4, 5, 6 bids on certain parts, and it's been extremely challenging. So I won't get into all the dynamics, but yes is the answer, and we're fighting it every single day. It's starting to flatten out a little bit. It's not going back to where it was. Steel, concrete, lumber are flattening out. We still face challenges with labor, but everything is still way more expensive. And understand that $264 million was projected before the pandemic. So you talk about a perfect storm. Kind enough and blessed to get the money, and now we've got to turn around and do it for that with the price of everything going up 20, 30, 40% in some areas.
Dr. Gilhouse, has there been any, I don't know, significant decisions that have had to be made that, maybe we didn't do something that we had hoped to do because of the, supply chain, inflation, all those things you just said?
So with $3.6 million going to each middle school and $3 million, $3 million to each middle school, 4.6 to each high school. So what we've had to do is we've had to cut back. So what would have been $3 million may now only be $2.2 million worth, but so we've been over. I mean, unfortunately, we've had to spend, and so we try to account for that with premiums, and so we're in pretty good shape, but the way it's going, it's going to be extremely tight, and it's going to be close, and the things that we promised our community to do, we have a responsibility to do that. So, so we're not really taking things out, but I think in the remodeling, what used to be $4 million, it's probably $3.2 million. So that's the best thing that we can try and do exactly with the cost of that material. So we just have to be extremely fiscally responsible.
Mr. Watson, I would add, if you'll recall in the previous bond, we were able to build a 6th elementary school with the premium money. And so none of that will be happening. And so it's kind of a trade-off. So a lot of that premium money, we're having to supplement those elementary schools that were way over.
I'm hoping that we have enough for an extra slide at an elementary school, so it certainly won't be a school.
I would just say, thank goodness for our AAA rating, because that allows us to get that premium and be able to keep us somewhat stable. Kudos to Tyler and Joe, and there's some others that sit in those meetings and just constantly are working this, working it. What can we do and how can we do it to ensure we have a product? So as you can see, Westwood View is quite amazing, so.
I have a question too. No, my mic's on, it's off now, but there we go. I know at one meeting when we had an update on, on projects, we talked about the contingency funds and what was happening with those, and it ties in with your question as well. How do you even begin to shape that? And when you bump up against what was there, what's your next decision?
I mean,
Well, we're spending contingency.
Right.
Yeah.
Right,
Yeah.
always.
So
Yeah.
we have contingency and allowance for every single project,
Right.
okay? So that is built into it. Every time we get a change order, we've been very fortunate because on all of our projects thus far, we've not exceeded the allowance or the contingency. And to be honest with you, that's kind of a little something we put in our back pocket, and if we can put that back in the pool of money and be responsible with that, it's been very helpful. So we have, and a lot of that, to be honest with you, the credit goes to our construction companies and our architects that we figure out creative ways to not pull away from the project, but still be able to bank in some of that contingency and allowance.
Good. As a former CFO and facilities manager, I understand that, Director, you're looking at how to recalculate those funds and protect them. But I didn't know, last time we talked about it, we were really bumping into that. And so I just wondered how that was going forward because
And that's
supply-
part of our meetings every single week, which
Yeah.
those change orders
Yeah.
and where we're at
It's a
with it.
new
And so-
puzzle every
Correct,
week.
and we try to
Yeah.
brainstorm, and when you work with good people, you come up with quality
Yeah.
conclusions
Yeah.
and answers.
It's a
So
partnership, isn't it?
You
Yeah.
got it.
But excellent work. I just was curious where you were with that.
Thank
so.
you. We've been very fortunate so far on contingencies and allowances.
Thank you. Other questions? Thoughts? Ryan, your ninth grader doesn't know the difference. It looks like just a
Brand new to
beautiful new
him.
building,
Yeah.
yeah. Pretty special.
Yeah.
All right, thank you, Tyler, and pass along thanks to your team. It's amazing, all the work that's getting done. Thank you. With that, we're at the wrap-up stage here, and as Tyler just mentioned, invitation to all on the committee to join the board and the administration team as we tour John Deemer on September 6th at 4 o'clock, and that's at 9700 Lamar. Be an opportunity to see that building just several months out from its opening. And then our next meeting, we'll be gathering here on October 27th at 4 o'clock. Anyone else with any last words of wisdom? We didn't officially get to welcome Dr. Hubbard. Instead, she sat down and we started firing questions at her. But thank you for, yeah. Thank you. That's the priority. But thank you for joining us as well. All right. With that, we're adjourned. Thank you all.
Thank you.